Hi, my name is Nancy Alder, and I'm here to share with you about how the hero's journey changed my life and why I'm interested in sharing it with you. I had a really pivotal moment several years ago when I was finishing up a job that was really not working for me. My health was failing, and I took advantage of an employee counseling program where you could have a phone call with a counselor. And as many counseling sessions starts, the counselor asked me, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me your life story. And so I took about 10 minutes to recount to her all the events in my life and why I kept struggling with relationships and with finding the right job and feeling like a failure and being and really struggling to just find happiness in life. And she listened really nicely, like counselors do. And when I was finished, she had the typical, it's interesting. Um, I could have shared exactly the same events in your life, told your story, linking the same elements together, and drawn completely different conclusions about who you are and where you're going in life. And this it was one of these mind-blowing moments where I realized, wow, everything that I'm telling myself about myself and the world is just a story. And if it's a story, I can change it. I really have resonated with Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and I'm going to introduce you to the stages of that journey and how we can explore those deeply in the in-person workshops that I run, and also in online material that I'm planning to develop. But firstly, I want to introduce you to a book by Charles Eisenstein that really inspired me. It's the more beautiful world we all know is possible. And he talks about how our current culturally predominant myth is called the myth of separation. It's our world tells us that we are separate, that we're vulnerable, that we need to compete for survival. And this leads to record numbers of chronic illnesses, depression, and addiction in our culture. But really, what Joseph Campbell says when he introduces the hero's journey is that this is a result of the fact that, unlike our ancestors, we don't have a unifying cultural myth to help us navigate the world, answer these big questions about who we are and where we're going in a way that's really life affirming and serves us. So I've been very inspired about the idea that the hero's journey can enable us to rewrite our own story in a way that crafts us not as the victim, but as the hero who's chosen this life in order to try to integrate all of the distractions, pull that we have towards material satisfaction in the world, towards a tweaked idea of success that really doesn't serve our deepest soul, and how we can rewrite those stories with help from our allies to overcome the unique dragons and challenges that we face in order to really live a more deeply fulfilling life. This enabled me to rewrite my story, and I was able to have the tapping into my intuition through reconnecting with my strong connection to nature, with having animal totems appear to me, with doing dream work, and with reigniting my meditation practice in order to have the courage to trust my intuition, to let my old life go, to allow myself to be led, and now to find myself living in a meditation community, basically having the freedom to be able to explore universal spiritual principles, elements of the hero's journey, and be able to do kind of scary things like developing this video and talking with all of you and developing content, not only to hopefully inspire people who are feeling stuck and some despair, with hope and a new story, as Charles Eisenstein says, of interbeing, of abundance, of mutual support, but also so that I can also continue to experience community on my unfolding journey. So let me take a moment just to introduce you to the elements of the hero's journey, how I experienced each of those on my path, whether or not that inspires you to want to learn more. So just a moment as I practice this screen sharing. And okay. All right. So the hero's journey starts with an experience of normalcy. You know, this is life that can feel somewhat routine, but maybe not particularly very lively, not particularly inspiring. Um, and this is often where we find ourselves caught in these routines of, you know, trying to find fulfillment through material gain, trying to define success as having an exciting resume or getting what we're looking for when we're working very hard. And some often feels like something is missing. And at that time, we end up receiving a call to adventure. Sometimes this is a life circumstance that changes pretty dramatically and forces us into a new world. Maybe a relationship ends, or we find ourselves needing to find a new job. Or sometimes it's something that's voluntary. You know, maybe it's just a little inkling of really wanting to go back to school, or really feeling like you want to live in a new place. The more voluntary our relationship with the call, you know, if we have the ability to say no, we usually do. We usually resist that. It's pretty scary. But at some point, we answer the call. If we proceed on the hero's journey, we find ourselves a little bit flying through midair with the hope that the next thing that is there to find us is going to catch us on the other side. This was very much how I felt, feeling like I needed to do more, wanting more connection in my job and my community, but having a lot of fear of having to take care of myself, not having enough money, not knowing what else I would do. And it really took my health deteriorating in a serious way before I was like, okay, I have to step away from this. I have to trust, because I love myself, and I want to believe that there's a better world out there for me. After answering the call, we end up crossing the threshold. There's always this distinct moment, this disorienting moment when we realize we're in a whole new world. We have no idea how things work. We don't know where we're going. We're kind of following a path in the woods. There's excitement, there's anxiety. This is a typical part of the process, that if we recognize it, we can push through it instead of turning around and trying to run back through the portal. This is also when we confront our dragons. They often appear to us in external circumstances, financial challenges, relationship conflict, but they're all really more deeply rooted in internal things that we struggle with, that all human beings really struggle with on a fundamental level. Things like fear and insecurity, doubt, and pretty much the first time we confront our dragon, it wins. It really kind of kicks our butt a little bit, and we kind of have to go back and regroup. And this is typically when allies or wise guides will show up. A wise guide is someone who's been through the journey before. They know a particular magic spell or have a sword that they can give to us to defeat the dragon. The allies are often people who help us realize who we are. They're the ones that say, you know, I believe in you. I've seen you be a great warrior in the past. I know you can overcome this challenge. Or they've been through similar challenges and can give you tips and kind of be your cheering squad. But what I love about this stage is that even though we get help from outside, we're absolutely interconnected. We are fully empowered to be living in our own journey. No one else can do this for us. No one else can defeat our dragon. And we often feel like we're just this little sprout coming up of potential for us, or something opening in our hearts. And we follow that. We trust that. And that ends up growing into a whole new part of our being. We end up obtaining a treasure in the myths around the world. This ends up often being, you know, releasing the princess that's been stolen, or getting the dragon's treasure. But really, it's a deep insight that we have about ourselves, about our world, something that enables us to master both worlds. The world that we left when we came to this journey, and the world that we now understand how to navigate because of going through this process, getting help from our allies, and overcoming our obstacles. And then we go through a process of returning to the previous world. Often we very much long for it, for the familiarity, for the connections, but once we return, we realize that it's not the same, because we're not the same. We've changed. And we need to find a way to sometimes create new support networks, to reorient our way of being. And sometimes there's a call to another hero's journey that comes out of that urge to kind of share, you know, what we know. And that's where I find myself now. I actually am on 3 different hero's journeys right now in different areas of my life. It's really helpful to have that perspective, so that I realize why things are so challenging. But I end up really, you know, looking for the allies. And so let me get us back to, let's see, I'm trying to find how to stop the screen share and come back to you full time. Huh, okay, well, we'll just finish up like this. So yeah, it's just very inspiring for me to realize that Joseph Campbell's work with myths around the world really all revolve around these common elements, this archetypal journey that's showing up regardless of time, regardless of culture, that's really orienting people towards what it means to be a human being. And when we look at our lives as heroes' journeys, as a continuing cycle of receiving a call, being asked to face the unfamiliar, knowing that we'll get assistance in overcoming our challenges, and that our ultimate success is not necessarily an outward accomplishment, it's some kind of insight that we have about ourselves and about the world. How do we integrate that together with all of our previous selves, all of our previous lives, and how do we then reach out and share that with others and continue on our journey? So I feel like having a community in order to recognize these stages, in order to cheer each other on, and be able to start to retell our cultural myths, start to reorient towards a way of explaining life that's more life affirming is so incredibly powerful. So I invite you to join me. You can learn more about my journey and about my current projects in person and online at www.ourinherentharmony.com. And you can also reach me directly there. I'd love to answer any questions that you have or hear about your journey and experience and anything that I can provide to assist you along and be your ally. Blessings on your journey.